It's October 3rd, 2019, and we're in Madison, Wisconsin, right before the National Dairy Shrine Awards Banquet. And it's my great pleasure to be here with one of our Pioneer Award winners, Dr. Sheila McGuirk. Sheila, you're finally a pioneer. What do you think?
Dave, at first I thought a Pioneer Award, boy, it makes me sound very old. But after that, I looked at the list of previous pioneers, the award winners from Dairy Shrine. The people who I know have been engaged in Dairy Shrine and the mission of Dairy Shrine, and it's deeply humbling. I'm absolutely honored to the core. I never feel worthy for an award as big as this one, not to belittle how deeply I feel that I'm honored, but I work with people who have made this possible, and all credit goes to them.
Well, we like to find out a little bit about the beginnings and the history, and I know quite a few people I've talked to claim you as a Maryland girl. Then there's some people in Cornell, and people in Wisconsin know about you a lot. So kind of a little history on Sheila.
Maryland is home, and it still feels like home today. I grew up on a family farm. I have 14 siblings. I'm a middle child, and that may explain a lot about my personality and what I've done in life. I was on the Maryland 4-H judging team with John Morris, and an experience that was very, very influential in my career decisions. I went to Cornell undergrad. George Trimberger was my judging coach, and I had an influential 4 years there. Because I was a Maryland resident, I could not get into Cornell's veterinary school. And so after 4 years at Cornell, where I was judging team, I played on a number of sports at Cornell, worked at the student union. I moved on to the University of Georgia, where Maryland students could pay in-state tuition at veterinary college. So I have a Georgia connection as well. From Georgia, I did first an internship in my first year out of veterinary school in Ontario. I realized then that I really liked teamwork and being inspired and cajoled and pushed by people, and I made a decision rather than go back to practice in Maryland, where I had grown up with a veterinarian and practiced in his practice as a student. I decided to stay in academia. That took me then to Ohio. And when I was at Ohio, I went back for a number of interviews, and I had been in Wisconsin as a kid, as a tennis player, and I remembered the rolling hills, the dairy cows. And at that time I thought, boy, if I ever decide to do anything with dairy cattle in my career, I got to think strongly about Wisconsin. The rest, I'll say, is history.
Well, I was involved with the Dairy Expo at the time, and when they talked about vet school openings, and there were quite a few people in the hierarchy of Dairy Expo wanted you here because of your expertise, not only with judging teams, but dairy cattle. So you were sought after pretty hard to come to Wisconsin.
Thank you, and that connection through Dairy Science and World Dairy Expo was probably the greatest influence that brought me here. When I interviewed for my faculty position at the University of Wisconsin, the school wasn't completed, so I came somewhat on faith. But it was the interviews with Terry Howard, all the Dairy Science department, that carved my, reinforced, shall I say, my wish to give Wisconsin a chance. And considering the interview was sparsely populated because there weren't many people in the veterinary school, they brought me out to World Dairy Expo to watch the show, and I thought that was the best interview possible. And so I saw many of the judging coaches that I'd seen over the years, people like you, that I said, I'm pretty sure this is the place to be.
Well, Sheila, your career at Wisconsin is well known to a lot of people, but you started with a fledgling veterinary school. It's developed into one of the top schools of the country, and you grew along with the vet school, I guess.
Yes, I did. In the beginning, there were a lot of things that a young veterinarian, early in education and academia, never believed would happen. There was a lot of organizational time, administrative time. When I first came to the University of Wisconsin School of Veterinary Medicine, I think there was a lot of skepticism amongst veterinarians whether the school was going to be an asset or a threat. And so it took a lot of legwork. I came in 1983. The first class didn't graduate till 1987. So I spent a lot of the first months that I was here going out, visiting with veterinarians, visiting farms, dairies that I knew, people that I knew, assuring them carving programs that would involve Wisconsin veterinarians in the education of students, making sure that we could convey the message that this was not competitive but cooperative and collaborative, and making the best for the young generation to come.
Well, I know you're very humble, but in terms of what your impact has been on particularly students in this state and at the vet school, as a woman, as a leader, you've opened a lot of doors for a lot of people, and I think you are pretty humble to probably not talk about that, but certainly you had some challenges, and certainly you've really opened the door for a lot of women to follow.
I appreciate that, Dave. I think, again, my upbringing was one in a large family of just blending in and getting the job done and doing what you do and do it well. And I think I approached my career that way. I certainly was one of the few women early on that got into veterinary school that wanted to specialize in large animals, and for sure in dairy cattle or cattle in general. As such, I just tried to do the best I could, get the job done, and I think that's the best way to be a role model or a teacher. A teacher must engage and be connected, and regardless of the audience, that's what I've tried to do.
Well, I've always found when I do these interviews that there's mentors. You mentioned Morris, Trimberger. Well, they're pioneers as well. You've got Terry Howard and Jim Crowley here, and Dave Dixon are also in that pioneer category, and now you join them. So you might have other mentors you want to acknowledge at this time as well.
For risk of skipping some, you've just named the most influential amongst them, and they definitely influenced my career in a positive, constructive way. They could challenge me, but they could collaborate. A lot of cooperation with Dairy Science Department and those mentors that you describe enabled men and empowered me to do a number of things. Starting back with John Morris, I just have to tell you that interaction of him as a judging coach. I was in a high school away from the cattle, but near John's home. And I would drive over from high school to sit in his basement practicing for the national contest with a model cow, and he'd have me describe a rump in 5 different ways. George Trimberger, as a judging coach, impeccable. I remember something, Dave, you'll appreciate. When we'd hand in our reasons cards or our placing cards, George would say, "Sheila, never shake your head this way. Always shake your head this way." I'll just credit him too, that Bill Thompson, Al Deming, and myself were on the same team, and we all ended up in Wisconsin. So many of the pioneers have had such an important influence on my career and the things that I've been able to do, not just by being standoffish, but being involved with me and connected. And that's a philosophy that I've adapted in my life.
Well, I can tell you that you two are going to be in that pantheon, and there are people that consider you a big mentor in their lives. So you can be assured of that. One thing that has always happened, people talk about families, and I think every person that's been involved in the dairy industry is family oriented. So you've already described growing up, but you certainly have a family now, and you have a supportive group of people. So tell us about them.
My family, Paul Manley is my husband, also a veterinarian, but a small animal orthopedic surgeon. So a great match insofar as he's far enough away not to interfere, but he understands. And he's very accomplished in his own right, and so he's respected, and we've worked things out to make a career rewarding for both of us. We have 3 children, of whom I'm very proud. Our 2 sons are very musical. Paul and I consider ourselves line drawers, so we're unsure of how that talent came through. Our oldest is a jazz musician in New York City. Also left the farm life, didn't want to be like his parents. Did work at the veterinary college with us for a while, but he chose to stay with music after that experience. Our second son is in Milwaukee. And our youngest, a daughter, interestingly, I found out we were going to have a daughter right during Expo, but she's in Madison and is teaching in a school with children with learning and special needs. So she's got the heart of gold. She probably has the most interest in the dairy world. I'll just tell you, in her 24 years, she's never missed an expo. And she's checked in a lot of cattle with me, whether she knew it or not. And when she could start to drive the golf cart and go about the barns and shuttle her mother around, it was quite a bonding thing.
Well, it's certainly been my pleasure to visit with Dr. Sheila McGuirk, a National Dairy Shrine pioneer, a true woman that's impacted a lot of people, not only in Wisconsin, but throughout the country with her research and efforts. Thank you much, Sheila.
Dave, it's very, very special coming from you. I can't tell you how much you've also nurtured my career and my life as a professional. Thank you.